Thank you so much for that. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you to everybody who came. So yeah, basically, I would like to start by thanking the team that was involved in putting together Overcoming Otherness. Thank you, Tamara, for the invitation. Thanks, Cecily, for taking care of all the logistics. And also thanks to Euros, who was in charge of the installation. So as Tamara mentioned in the introduction, performance is the point of departure of my work, although I see it as a medium or a lens that allows me to engage with other mediums such as 3D animation, sound, installation. And my strongest focus in the last few years has been producing single channel videos and expanded video installations. So Cecily, were you able finally to download, and can we share the presentation?
Yes, for sure. How is this?
Yeah, it's there.
Great.
So yeah, so we actually should go to the second slide. Okay, so in talking a little bit more directly of the piece that is shown at the exhibition, I would like to say that there was a lot of people that worked with me and contributed to it while I was working on it at the end of 2021 and early 2022. And in its short life, identity templates for a disordered body has become paradigmatic of my work, representing many of my interests and concerns as an artist and as a person, my ethical reflections and aesthetic inclinations, as well as my relationship with art institutions. The piece is located at a temporal and conceptual intersection, serving as a sort of prologue of the work that I'm currently doing. So, through this talk, I would like to share some aspects of this process with all of you and expand on the place that this piece occupies within the larger picture of my practice. During the early days of 2021, I started a residency at the SPC Gallery in Montreal. I was inspired at the time by the creation of avatars and the strange connections between automatons, robots, and sex dolls, and various forms of racialized labor, as it is eloquently developed in Nada Tanesowski and Khalidis Boris book, Surrogate Humanity. You can go to the second slide now. So initially, my goal was to, quote unquote, upload myself into the computer, or in other words, making a 3D model of my body to be able to animate it in ways that were unclear at the moment. My first attempt was through photogrammetry. Change the slide, please. This is a technology in which overlapping two-dimensional images of the same object are processed through software to generate photorealistic 3D representation of volumetric surfaces, a kind of analog 3D scanning. The next slide, please. We had to do this process a few times, as the first results weren't very good or aligned with my initial expectations. At the moment, I didn't really know much about 3D, except that I really liked it and I really wanted to put my hands on it. But photogrammetry and 3D scanning are meant to be done with a static object, a piece of land or architecture, not with a breathing body for whom complete stillness is extremely difficult and rather unnatural. So we are meant to move, so this was a particularly challenging project. While going through those trials and errors and familiarizing with a new way of seeing my own image, I decided that my very first 3D work was going to be a digital remake of the iconic piece Las Dos Fridas by Chilean performance duo Las Yeguas del Apocalipsis. You can go to the next one. And this was a way for me to emphasize the connections between performance and digital media. From my particular standpoint as an immigrant artist in Quebec, I had the desire of challenging what I perceived as an alleged neutrality and homogeneity in the 3D image, which I understood as a form of complacency. For the most part, I used to see it as a medium that lacked a critical framework. So in a way, to bring these references from distant contexts was a way for me to stretch the limits of digital production. You can go to the next slide. Las Yeguas del Apocalipsis, which translates as the Apocalypse Mares, was a performance duo composed by Francisco Casas and Pedro Lemebel, mostly acted between 1987 and 1993. These years marked the end of the Pinochet dictatorship in the country and the transition to democracy, which is the context in which they developed a work characterized by strong political commitments. They created a number of live actions and performances, emphasizing the violation of human rights in Chile during this period, as well as aspects of queer identity politics that was almost non-existent at the time. By revising their work in the context of my own research, I got to the reenactment of Las Dos Fridas. Can you go to the next one, please? That is based on a work of Mexican painter Frida Kahlo and possibly her own health struggles. In this performance, the artist connected themselves through a blood transfusion, making a comment about the AIDS crisis those days. The fully developed render of this remake was produced in a later work titled The Museum of the Copy-Pasted Identities through a residency at the Center for Culture and Technology at the University of Toronto. So I would like to share with you an excerpt of one of the video pieces that was part of that exhibition, which is called the Museum Excerpt. That's the file. There you go. Great. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so thank you. Later on that year, I'm back in 2021. I received an invitation from Dasibao, an artist-run center focused on image practices in Montreal, to be part of a group show about performance and image making. I showed them some of the outcomes of the residency at the SPC Gallery, and specifically, I sent them a process piece that showcased the screen recording, that's in the next slide, of the 3D model assembled in the photogrammetry software. I knew that I wanted to use that footage because beyond making a 3D rendition of my body, I was interested in highlighting the technical particularities of that process. I decided to take that material as the centrality of a new work and integrate the references that I was looking at. In a way, I was already on the path to developing the Museum of the Copy-Pasted Identities, but when I received the invitation from Dasibao, I decided to hold on to it and instead deviate towards a different angle. During those days, I was also wanting to bring into a piece the YouTube capsule 73 Questions of Vogue, which you're seeing in the slide. These video interviews always present a similar structure. A disembodied camera interviewer encounters a celebrity, either at their mansion, in the park, a street, and follows them asking all sorts of questions until reaching the 73rd. I was particularly drawn by the construction of spontaneity and the performativity of the here and now, which is so characteristic of the time that we live and the way that the self is performed in digital platforms. Through these different mediums and references, you can go to the next one. My aim was to articulate a narrative around the real event of having made a 3D scan of my body, and furthermore, to show a full process of objectification, all the way from the scanning to shooting a fictitious performance of it, editing it in the software, and finally producing a 3D printing. Through these connections, I wanted to convey an affective engagement with the metaphor surrounding otherness and the fact of becoming an object and being on display, which is central to my practice in general. The exploration with these technologies of representation occurs in parallel to positioning myself in entering the space of the institution in a context where so-called diverse identities are sought throughout the ecosystems of Canadian contemporary art. As I previously mentioned, ID templates took me in an unexpected direction, somehow representing a before and after. The piece integrated a series of production strategies that, looking back at over 2 years from its outset, I have come to define under the concept of hyper-self-mediation. This is a term that responds to another that's often used to describe my work, self-representation. One of the differences between the two relies on the connection between self-representation and a practice that is well known to art history, self-portraiture. When faced with a self-portrait, interpreters often index meaning back to the individual depicted in this type of image. However, in today's technological and social articulations, a self-image exceeds the conceptual reach of a portrait beyond its field of study and action. As an effectively charged and potentially trafficked digital object, its ambivalent condition unfolds as the document of a system, a graphic value in a technical device, a proof of function and capital. You can just stay in that slide, please. Throughout my practice, I have played with as many mediums I have encountered. I first started producing naturalistic images in which I would present myself in a unified way, with my body referencing back to my, for lack of a better word, identity, and insisting in that dynamic, pretty much like any human projected to its own context, highlighting notions that would produce me as myself in this scenario, racially, sexually, and geopolitically. So on that note, I would like to share a fragment of another piece from 2019 called Dating for Export, which is representative of some of these things that I'm describing.
Do you want to come over?
trying to reach is not available right now.
Hello. Hey. Hey, what's up? Hello. Hello.
The person you're trying to reach is not available right now.
Hey. Hello. Hey, what's up? Hello. Hey, chillin'. Not bad. You? Not bad. You? Yeah, just watching some Netflix. You have my pics? How's it going? What? You have my pics? Good, thanks. Fun. You? Cool. What are you looking for? What are you looking for? Friends and fun. Yeah, what are you looking for? Hey, man, where are you at? Not too much. Just chillin'. What are you looking for? Hey, man, what's up? Friends and fun. Hey, chillin'. You? How you doing? You? Friends and fun. Yeah, just watch chillin'. How's it going? Do you have more friends? How you doing? You? Friends. Do you have more pics?
The person you're trying to reach is not available right now. Sorry you're having trouble. Please try again later. Trouble later.
It is a place, I think, that can exist in yourself, where you...
Yeah, there you go. You can go to the next one. All right, so while doing this type of work, I became more and more interested in the technologies that I was using to portray these versions of myself, and looking at how technology carried in itself meaning and cultural configurations. So my practice became an inquiry of becoming image through technical means. I think it is precisely in this process of technocultural interrogation that the self gets displaced, decentered from the composition frame, becoming a gravitating force in a field of complex relationships. By contrast, after a few years working with 3D software, with its particular layout and way of unfolding the 3D space, I see myself more and more invested in this space as one that is inherently ever-expanding and abstract, or that at least contains the potential of abstraction. In this sense, It also holds a potential of disrupting technologies that are embedded within capitalism and historically defined in military activities of surveillance, war, and invasion. You can go to the next slide. This is how my self-images, initially unified or wanting to, started to shatter, becoming progressively dismembered, sectioned, and fragmented. To talk about hyper self-mediation is then to refer to a strategy of depersonalization, a process of dispersion in the form of augmentation. In simulacra and simulations, oh yeah, you can go to the next one. In simulacra and simulations, fringe theorist Jean Baudrillard coined the term hyperreality to define the replacement of reality with its representation, often through signs that confuse and interrupt it. In this perspective, hyper self-mediation becomes a mode of production based on loose self-metonymies, selfie technologies that do not necessarily refer back to its point of departure, which is me as a person. Instead, it unfolds through performativity, 3D renders, documentations, autoethnographies, and fictions to convey environments of the body, identityscapes, and meta-narratives. You can go to the next. So to finish, I would like to quote something that was said by writer and curator Lorenza Pignati, which goes as, we should no longer think in terms of technology shaping self-perception, but instead of technology simulating the self and then replacing the self with its simulation. Thank you so much.